Today I had a very interesting, thought-provoking conversation with Jessica Fern. Jessica is a psychotherapist, public speaker, and trauma and relationship expert, and the author of Polysecure and Polywise. In her international private practice, Jessica works with individuals, couples, and people in multiple partner relationships, helping them to embody new possibilities in life and love. This conversation was a huge learning experience for me. I hope you listen with an open mind and open heart and walk away with a greater perspective on this often controversial topic. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Love. I'm so happy to be joined by our guest today, Jessica Fern. Jessica, we finally made it work, and I just want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Of course, I've got your bio in front of me, and I've read 2 of your books. But I would love it if you can just tell our audience, from your words, through your words, what about your practice and your work, and
Yes.
what you're actually currently most passionate about.
Yeah, so I am a psychotherapist and I'm an author, and most people know me for my books Polysecure and Polywise. So as a therapist, I focus on attachment and trauma, but I have a specialty in working with people in non-traditional relationships, non-monogamous relationships, polyamorous relationships. Yeah, and most
And
passionate about is my next book, but we can talk about that later.
oh, that's exciting. I want to know now, but okay, we'll wait. So I really have enjoyed learning from you. As when we were preparing for this podcast, I work with one of my best friends, and we read books together, and we talk about our learnings and our biggest inquiries. And I love having that collaboration. So tell me about Polysecure, because you did like bring together,
Those
attachment
terms.
theory.
Oh,
You
and
did. This is
non-monogamy.
a term that you have coined, which I think is just brilliant, Jessica, because you're teaching people how to have secure relationships around polyamory.
Yeah, so before the book Polysecure, there wasn't anything really out there. There wasn't a book out there on attachment and non-monogamy that brought those two together. And unfortunately, most of the resources either just didn't address non-monogamy at all, or maybe even pathologized it. So many people who were practicing or, identify as non-monogamous would want to learn about attachment, and then they couldn't find themselves in that literature, and they would get very discouraged. So that was sort of one of the intentions, was this is such an important theory for people that are having multiple love partnership relationships. And, I think those two things needed to be brought together.
Exactly. So share with us your background around getting into this field of consensual non-monogamy. Was it
Yeah.
through your life experience and then identifying with other people around you, or how did it turn out to, because 75% of your practice is working with people with consensual non-monogamy,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The majority of my practice is people that are non-monogamous. It really came to me, but it was both personal and then it became professional. But it wasn't something that I was clearly like, oh, this is what I'm doing and now I'm going to make it my profession. I was living and working in Boulder, Colorado, as a psychotherapist. And I've told this story other places too, if people have heard it. And it was literally in 1 week. All the couples I was working with brought up that they were curious about opening up their relationship. And
Wow.
so, right, it was like, and it just felt like it landed in my lap. And I was like, okay, I know about this. I've done it myself. But professionally, I didn't feel like I knew what to do with it necessarily. So I quickly ordered all the books they said they were reading, started to do my homework and
Yeah.
look to see if there was any certificates or anything for practitioners. At that time, there wasn't. The only 1 or 2 resources I found weren't very great. And so I had to kind of figure it out as I went with my clients.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
I was like, I have to say, Jessica, I am just so new to this. And
Mhm.
this is when it comes to everything we do in our work with Real Love Ready, it's all about expanding our awareness and our
Yeah.
perspectives and learning because I don't have people close to me that are in consensual non-monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, I really want to know more. And obviously, there are so many people that are doing this, but
Yeah.
not in my circle.
Right.
Right. And you may, but it's happening, of course,
It's
and
happening.
it's growing. It's growing, right, Jessica? Would you say that is true, or is it more people are coming out?
More people are publicly doing it. I think this has been happening, forever. And
Hmm.
statistically, we know that people cheat at a very high frequency. So that's happening, right? But yes, it's sort of growing that people are coming out that this is a public identity that they have.
So there was to me it was like, and you actually talk about this even for people that are interested and curious.
Mhm.
It's like you have to. It's almost like changing your own reality around and the worldview. You talk about how it's changing. You are going to have to step in a new paradigm.
Exactly.
And it seems like almost when I was reading, I'm like, all this new language.
It is.
There's so many words or terms that I was like, I don't know what that means. So can you
Exactly.
share with us, for instance, like some of the terms that people would use if they're in a consensual non-monogamous relationship, like
Mhm.
some of the ways they would describe that relationship and what those mean? Like CNM is like an umbrella term, right?
Yes. So CNM, consensual non monogamy, people also use ethical non monogamy. That's the umbrella term for some version of practicing having multiple sexual or romantic partners, and everyone knows about it. It's not a secret. That's why it's consensual
Mm-hmm.
or ethical. And within that umbrella, there's many styles. So people can practice more of a monogamish. Occasionally I have a monogamous partner, but occasionally on a business trip, one of us might have a hookup, or together we might play with someone every once in a while and bring in a third. There's people that are swingers. There are people that are polyamorous, where they're really making full on love based partnership or attachment based relationships with more than one person. There's the terms of solo polyamory or open marriage. So there's lots of different ways that people do this.
Yeah,
Yeah, even one
there's so many
person.
variations.
Yeah, even one person might have one kind of style with one partner and a different style that they're practicing with another partner. So it's not just even within, the pairing of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciated you sharing your own personal journey in both
Mhm.
books
Yeah.
around um, like their struggles that you faced. You told a story about how when you were telling your own parents about coming, like this is what's, you're like, okay, can you tell us about that story, Jessica? Because I
Yeah.
thought that was, and how your mom, like your mother-in-law, sorry,
Mother-in-law.
like she
Yeah.
started to cry and was just, and
Yeah.
she was looking back on her own experience, like in the 60s, right? And going like, this may not be safe
Exactly.
or
Right.
accepted.
Exactly. I had very different experiences telling my parents and my in-laws. So my parents have been married and divorced several times to multiple spouses. And so when I
Mhm.
told them, they were just like, "Oh, maybe that's what we should have all done." Like it was like an
Yeah.
aha.
Right. Right. Wow.
Real monogamy wasn't necessarily working for us, right? Whereas when we told Dave, my husband at that time, and we told his parents, my in laws, my mother in law did. She started to cry because to her, she was so afraid it just meant divorce. And she was, understandably, like she was connected back to seeing in the 60s, and it was like these key parties and sort of these suburban like wife swap parties, that's what she knew it as.
Mm.
It was a very threatening thing, thinking that we were doing something akin to that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
how can you explain just for those that are listening that are wanting this, right? For
Yeah.
themselves, for their
Yeah.
partnership. And how do you coach your clients on telling others? Like how did you have that conversation with your parents, with your in-laws at the time
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
like educating them on what your approach would be, where it's going to be?
Right. So it's a very personal thing, and not
Yeah.
everyone who's doing this is has the privilege to come out or needs to come out. But usually when I'm coaching people, we discuss like when is it your private life and when is it becoming secrecy that could be damaging certain relationships where you feel like you're living a double life by not telling a certain friend or family member, right? Because some people might never be able to come out at work and some people can. Same thing with their family. So I just want to honor that whole range of relational realities that people have. But yeah, I mean, often more people are okay with it, they understand it, then you'd actually be surprised, right? But it also is common that people open up and they lose certain relationships that are meaningful to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the common fears around CNM? Even because I think there's, I mean, and this is like, first of all, there's of course there's fears within the couple that are like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the cultural fears, the societal fears, like
Yeah.
the people feel threatened by this, right? I'm sure that that's one, and like one you talk about is leading to separation,
Yeah.
right? That this, even though you want to stay together, it's
Right.
like, how can we do this? And this is what you're helping people learn with
Exactly.
Polysecure.
Right. Is how can we do this and do it well? And many people do. They open up and they do it well. That doesn't mean it's easy. There's usually that transition period, like anything that we would take on that's new, a different paradigm of being would initially can be very difficult. But a lot of people are able to do this wonderfully. And yet, the misconception, the fear, the prejudice is that it automatically would mean the breakup of a relationship. So many
Right.
people fear that. And there is some truth to, yeah, do people sometimes open up and break up? Absolutely. But the point that I make is that it's not because of polyamory itself. It's often a relationship that was probably going to end, but the opening up really expedited that process or it brought to light things that needed to be addressed and then they didn't get addressed.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you're helping people do, right? That are coming to you for this help, for this support, is figuring out your attachment, figuring out your own emotional wounding, your childhood stuff, all the things that even in a monogamous relationship, we all need to work on and address within ourselves so that we can have a secure any relationship,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
A secure
I
monogamous relationship or a CNM relationship, correct?
Absolutely right. If we want to be in a secure relationship, a healthy relationship, I do believe we need to do that inner work and that interpersonal work. But there is something about exclusivity that sometimes like allows us to not have to do that work in the same way that being in an open paradigm of relating really kind of pushes us to have to look at certain things that we might not have to otherwise. Yeah, so there's a real
Right.
opportunity for up leveling.
Yes. And so there's this great section in the book about security of a monogamous relationship versus a healthy functioning one. Can you
Yeah.
please go into that, Jessica?
Yeah, so I talk about the difference between like where do we get our sense of security? And is it just from the structure of the relationship or is it from our emotional experience? So the structures would be the fact that we're legally married or that we live together or that we own things together or we have children, right? These are structural things that many people that's what they lean on to be like, I'm good, I'm safe, we're okay. Right?
Right.
Versus what's your actual emotional experience? Do you emotionally feel safe, connected, right? Do you emotionally feel that you're engaged with each other? Do can you trust and lean into each other? And so a lot of people realize, oh, I feel safe because of the structure we have, not actually from my relational experience with my partner. Yeah, so I'm not
Right.
anti-structure. It's great. Have all the structure you want, but I want you to get your security from your actual experience relationally and emotionally from that relationship, not just from the structure itself.
Are you ready to take your relational skills to the next level? Join us April 12th to the 14th, 2024 for In Bloom, a love and relationship summit. Real Love Ready is putting you in the room with 10 of your favorite relationship experts, including Dr. Gabor Mate, Jillian Turecki, and Dr. Jody Carrington. Learn from the most trusted names in love with a weekend of skill building, growth, and community. Be there in person in Vancouver, BC, or join us virtually from anywhere in the world. Head to realloveready.com to learn more and secure your spot. You can use the code LOVE15 to save 15% off your tickets. I truly hope to see you there. There was a big differentiation in there. And you go into it and like, I just encourage people that want to learn more about CNM or secure relationships, Polysecure, because there's a lot of nuance in that and a lot, I think, of introspection, which you invite people to go into around exactly what you just said. Is this a structural thing for your security, or is it the intimacy in all different levels that you have with your partner?
Yeah, right. I mean, and we can apply this to other areas of life, like with family, let's say, and our own children, right? Do we feel like we're a healthy family just because we're under the same roof, right? Or what are the actual quality of the interactions that are happening under that roof?
Yeah. So the other learning I had in this, when I was reading your books, was around relationship orientation versus choice.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, like this, and that made sense to me, but I really wanted to talk about that with you because you said like somebody, like there are many people that are like, this is like, I'm not choosing to be polyamorous. Like, it's something that's within me. It's innate. I don't think I'm wired to have a monogamous relationship.
Yeah, exactly. This is a hot topic. And it's a contentious topic.
I'm sure it is.
Right?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Why is it such a hot topic? Like, because the world is growing and changing in so many ways. Human beings are evolving and changing.
Right.
We're all seeing it.
Exactly. So, the debate that happens is sort of, is polyamory a choice or is it an orientation? And an orientation, that would be something that we don't feel like we're choosing. Maybe something like gender, right? Where this feels like who I am. So people really describe their polyamory as their orientation. This is how they're wired. It's innate to them, just like you said. They didn't wake up and choose to be this way. And so some people in that camp don't want polyamory to be called a lifestyle, right? Because I think they feel that it diminishes it. But half of my clients would identify it as a lifestyle and not their orientation, but they're committed to it as the practice. But they might not have initiated it on their own. Given different circumstances, they might go back to exclusive relationships. So some people are they want people to use the term maybe ambiamorous instead, like someone who's going back and forth, right?
Or ambiamorous.
Fluidity or something like that. Which is great. I'm all for even having more terms. The challenge, though, that happens is people that are polyamorous are seeking legal rights. Polyamorous folks are not a protected class. And there's certain places in Canada, in the US, and other places in the world that are trying to make unions of multiple partnerships legal. Co-parenting among more than two people, three, parents become legal. And so let's say you have three people, one of them might not feel that it's their orientation, but does that mean they're not, but this is their practice. This is their life choice. So, do they not get rights now because they can't use that term? Right. So it gets really nuanced which
it does.
Yeah.
I on the flip side, in my mind, I'm like, and I don't think this will change in me, but I feel like my orientation is to be monogamous.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you hear that. Like, I can think about most people in my life that would say that. It's like, my orientation is not to be polyamorous. So why can't the opposite be true? Of course it can be.
Can we allow it to be a spectrum with, on each end, people might identify as really more, this is their complete orientation. And then there's a lot of people in the middle. And I think another thing that happens is we think that if it's a choice, then we shouldn't get protections legally. But it's like, well, religion is protected, right? And many times that isn't, a cultural legacy, but it's also a choice, right? So it's like it's just as valid in my mind to be either one, and I think it's important that we honor the truth for each individual of how they feel their polyamory to be and how they want to identify.
Yes, I agree. So let's talk about common ideals and principles that those that are practicing CNM typically embrace. You list them and I'm like, yeah, like, it's like almost like these are the ways that we as a group of people that are practicing, this is what we believe. This is how we want to live in our relationships. This is right. What would be some of those things?
Yeah, so just a few of them would be seeing love not as a finite resource, but as infinite. But honoring that time is a finite resource, right? Seeing love not as possessive, that I own you, your body, your sexuality, your love, because we're in partnership together, right? Love is not possessive, but it is really free. Others would just be like the values of transparent communication, honesty, transparency in general, right? And things like around, moving towards challenges. So a common challenge that people are afraid of is jealousy when there's multiple partnerships. And of course, jealousy happens, but there's really this value to say, well, let's face jealousy, not avoid jealousy.
Yes, you talk a lot about jealousy, and it's like this natural human emotion.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's okay.
Yes. And so, I love the fact that, you lay it out. And I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who said she found out that I was going to be talking to you. And she's like, oh my God, I read that book. It's like the Bible. It's like, there's just so much in it about like really great guidance and tools and skills. Mm-hmm. And you lay out like just, rules of engagement, like agreements that you want to have with your partner. And of course, the ideal is to sit down with your, whoever these people are that you're going to be experiencing life with, and being like, okay, this is how we're going to do this. And this is how we have to do, like, so that everybody can, in somehow, you're creating a container to create as much security as you can. Right.
Exactly. And that would be another value or principle and practice, as well as people in non-monogamous relationships. They create their relationship agreements. There's a lot of sort of forethought and negotiation and sharing. What are our shared values? What are our shared agreements and principles? And that's something that any relationship would benefit from. What are we doing together? Why are we here together? Right? Yeah. What are our agreements? Instead of just assuming we're on the same page about it.
Right. Like you gave the example, for instance, and I was like, I read it and I was like, oh, I would be so jealous. Like you give the example of like you're laying in bed with one of your partners and they're texting the other person.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, I would just be so jealous and upset about that. Like we're in bed together, like, but if like these things are maybe going to happen. But if you have an agreement around like, I'm not cool with that.
Yeah. Or sometimes I am, but maybe right after sex, I'm not, so just figuring that out. Right. Yeah. Right. And making clear agreements around some of those boundaries.
And the other thing that really was so clear to me that you say, and you're reinforcing is like a CNM relationship is because of its creation. It is insecure, right? Is that the right way to say it? It's like, it's fundamentally
relative to monogamy, right? It's structurally less secure.
And so what you're doing is setting up ways to make it more secure.
Exactly.
Did I say that right?
Yes, exactly. Right. That's the intention, especially of Polysecure, is to support people in how to create those secure relationships, the secure functioning. Because being polyamorous, it does have more insecurity built in, right? Or less, it has less of those structural securities that people that are monogamous can rely on. Yeah. And
so Jessica, can you, go ahead.
The case, though, that to them being non-monogamous, they actually feel more secure because there isn't the same obligation that shows up in monogamous relationships, right? Where you're like, are you with me because you actually want to be with me, or just because we're married, or because we've been together so long, or because divorce would not be allowed with, in our community, so to speak. Whereas we really know, and usually in non-monogamous partnerships, we're together because we want to be, because we don't have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
There was this example that I don't know if it was when you were speaking with Esther Perel or whether it was in your book. I can't recall where I got this, memory from. But you were talking about a couple, for instance, and I think we've all heard of this or maybe experienced it ourselves. So a long-term partnership, husband and wife, maybe she or he is just like, let's say she is not interested in sex and they haven't had sex for a long time. They have, they have everything else going on in the relationship, supposedly. And he's like, well, but I really want sex. It's something that's very important to me. And so she's like, okay, well then I'm okay with you having sex with other women, but I really still want to be in partnership.
Yeah.
And that's just and I think the conversation, did you write about this, or was this something that you talked about?
I'm not sure which one.
Okay.
Yeah,
but I think the perspective was like, the discussion was so much bigger than just that. Because I was thinking, I felt like, like the man, he wants sex. And it's a human need. It's like not a need or want, both, I think, for intimacy. That's what he wanted, right? And it was almost like, and it's like, if she's okay with that, going outside the marriage, but she doesn't. Can we just go into that discussion, Jessica? Do you know where I'm going with this? It was just
Yeah. I mean, well, you tell me. I think what you're getting at is there are some marriages that eventually become low sex or sexless, but there's amazing things about that marriage for them outside of the sex, right? The life they've created, the home they've created, the community they have, the children maybe they have, whatever it is, right? The shared projects they have, and they don't want to give that up. But one or both partners also doesn't want to live without sex in their life. And so for sometimes those partnerships, non-monogamy is a great option, where it doesn't have to be one or the other. They can still maintain this, companion marriage that they have, so to speak, and then have love and sex outside of that. They might, of course, have many types of love, but I mean, sexy love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens when somebody's coming to you, a couple is coming to you, and one partner really wants to open the relationship?
Yeah.
And the other person's like, no, I'm not okay with this. Or even, okay, I want to learn more, but let's go to the therapist. Let's go to Jessica or somebody that specializes in CNM and figure out if this is possible in my comfort. Because you said there's a few things around this dynamic. Number one, if there's a couple that's coming, the conversation has already started. The person that's wanting it has already been, they're like way ahead. They've already been thinking about this.
Wanting this for a long time, usually. Yeah.
Right. And the partner that's not wanting it, they're behind, right? In their thought process around it, in their readiness, curiosity, all of that. So that already poses
it creates this disparity between
friction or timing. Yeah. How do you help people in that situation?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things we do. And in Polywise, I get more into that, especially of troubleshooting. How do we support the partner that is the more reluctant partner or wouldn't have initiated this themselves? And so sometimes it's just about going slow, not necessarily leaping into full-on relationships with new people, but more having certain experiences outside of the marriage or even together that just start to titrate your nervous system and even the relationship to opening up. So we'll get clear, okay, what could be the first few steps to experiment with this? What does experiment look like? And that can go really well, and it can, of course, backfire and then people realize, why this is potentially so hard. But I am frequently pleasantly surprised about how many people were initially the absolute no to this, and then within the year of experimenting are completely on board.
Wow. And so can you give us an example of titrating or experimenting? to
Right.
begin
So it
with?
might be okay not to necessarily start sleeping with people, but just start to go on dates with people and come home and see what that's like. Right. Or maybe
Hmm.
there's some aspect, go on dates and have a kiss or something. And then before you're just going out, because, and everyone's different. Some people struggle more with their partner having emotional connections, others struggle more with there being sexual connections. Right. So that could be an example. It can be that there's, some people just are like, can we just start with, if there is a new person in your life, we're not necessarily seeing them every day, or you're not taking vacations immediately, that you're sort of pacing that new relationship in a way. And this is tricky because that new person needs to feel like they're getting their needs met, of course. But that it's
Hmm.
also not just completely too fast for the other partners as well.
Like when I was talking to my friend Kirsten about this, when we were, talking about your books and just having these bigger discussions, I'm like, it's so much to manage. Like,
Yeah.
Jessica, do you feel that way, or is it because you have been practicing CNM for a while that you've managed? Like, I just feel like it's so like you've got all these different dynamics and people,
Yeah.
and we all are just so unique and have our wants and needs and attachment styles and lives,
Yeah.
children. Like, it's just, and I can't. Like, it's just so much to manage. That's what
Yes.
I like.
And some people manage it much better than others, of course. And I think it
Yeah.
is more complex, right? When there's more people, there's more complexity of
Hmm.
navigating, negotiating multiple needs and wants and preferences and nervous systems and trauma histories, right? But I think it's sort of like pick your complexity, right? Some people, it comes through their work or their hobbies or how many kids they have or how many partners they have. I think, so I can look at, something, other things that other people do, and I'm just like, whoa, that's too much for me, right? And it might be fine
Yeah.
for them. But yeah, it is more complex relationally for sure. And, but that doesn't mean that's not a value judgment, right?
I really like that. Pick your complexity.
Yeah.
Right. Like take a look at your life and other people's
Yeah.
lives and be like, yeah, that's their complexity. That's
Yeah,
that's that's their
complexity.
yeah.
And I think we can all like evaluate, is this complexity toxic for me? Does it make me sick on certain levels, right? Is it too complex and overwhelming, or is this complexity pushing me, evolving me, helping me to grow more and more? So whatever your complexity is, right, whatever domain of life, assess, is it actually a complexity that supports you into growth, into your own evolution, or is it just stressful?
Yeah. And so can you share more about your own personal journey around this and how things have evolved for you and your family? And
Yeah.
whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd be very
definitely.
interested just to know your story more about it.
Yeah, my story actually started at 14, the first time I kissed a girl, and I'd kissed boys already and had experiences with boys and then started to have experience with girls and realized, oh, I'm bisexual. So I had that identity at such a young age compared to a lot of people. And so it was kind of normal to kiss both sexes, both genders, or in between genders, even,
Hmm.
in high school and college. I had a lot of friends that were into different kinds of exploration like that. So I was lucky. There was no name for it though. There was never like the name, like non monogamy or polyamory was never spoken. It was just kind of
Right.
the way it was, right? And it wasn't until, so then I was in a monogamous marriage with David, who's my co author of Polywise. And then it was from there that we really opened up as a polyamorous and really started living polyamorous in an out there way.
And what did that look like in your family, like being
Yeah, at
married and you
that
have your,
time, yeah, we were married, we were living together. We have a child, and so
mhm.
we would date people outside of the house. and our partners, none of them lived with us at that time initially. But there was really space for those people to be just as emotionally as important, right? That we could really have full on committed partnerships. They just wouldn't have been nesting at that time, you know? And then Dave and I stayed together as a family, but we uncoupled, as romantic partners and sexual partners. And so we lived apart for a little bit. And then we moved back in, and we actually lived with an ex-partner of mine, but there was a partner of mine we lived with and a partner of his, and we had our family, so we've had different iterations.
So, Jessica, you're saying that you lived as two couples in the same home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had like separate, upstairs, downstairs. But we did. Yeah, we had that for a little bit. It was super sweet. Yeah. And it wouldn't have worked with just any partnerships that we had, but that's what we did for a while.
But does that mean, just in that example, I wanted to ask you as we go here, does that mean that you were, you each had your partners?
Yeah.
So that you're monogamous to that partner, but you're living in, does that?
Yeah, not always.
You're still.
Yeah, there might still have been maybe other relationships, but this was like how the nesting in the family was structured at that time.
And so your experience with David's partner, for instance, when she moved in, and his experience with yours, how did that go? Yeah. So it's just like you're all one happy family. That can mean that's just, we're not in a fairy tale here. But you're both accepting, open.
Yeah, right. It wasn't always easy, but we'd have to have like house meetings, just like people who cohabitate.
Yeah.
Right. There'd have to be like, we did family dinner night. We had, night that you have our son because it's our date night and vice versa, so we just really, there's a lot of scheduling that was involved. But it was
How did your son handle it?
Yeah, he loved it because there was, his attachment to David and I has never been broken, right? He's always had his two parents. And so that one period of time where we did have other partners nesting with us, it was kind of like having an aunt and an uncle in the house that he loved. He loved having them around. Yeah. And now we have a situation where Dave and our son, we live together and we each have a partner that doesn't live with us. And, those are really positive role models in our son's life. He loves the relationships with them. Yeah. And their children.
Wow. My mind, I just love this because it's like my mind is like blown by, it seems evolved. It is because like in a way, like it's just like this opening of like there's limitless possibilities, right?
Yeah,
there's potential,
right? It's an expansion of possibilities for sure. I want to be careful though, because I don't like when people think that polyamory is more evolved than people that are exclusive, right? And it's like
no, and I didn't mean it that way, Jessica. I just think it takes a lot of work I'm sure to get there.
It does,
and that's why I was like, okay, like I said, I read your books, but I'm like, this is something that you would really need to understand these principles and be careful and be very cautious.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people involved, a lot of hearts involved.
Exactly.
And the communication has to be your communication has to be, like you said, transparent, honest. You don't want to be messing around with this, right?
The communication is really perfect. There's a lot of learning in retrospect, but really just having that growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset makes such a big difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say are one of the key messages that you are just really reinforcing that you want people to understand better?
I want people to know that this is a valid way of living and loving and being. Yeah. It's possible. It's been possible. Many people have been doing this a long time. There's nothing wrong with you if this is who you feel yourself to be or if this is what you want to do. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, we hear more horror stories or we assume the prejudice or, negative things about it. And we can see that in any relationship structure. So just for people to know, there's a lot of amazing things about this relationship structure.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about your new book?
Yeah, it's not about non-monogamy at all. Yeah.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, yeah, I'm gonna, be switching to a more general audience, and it's about inner transformative work. So looking at the ways that we have these different parts of our inner critic and shame, and are the ways we escape, and the interaction of those, and sort of how to work through those.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had my New Year's resolution this year, and it was to really get really up close and personal with my inner critic,
Oh, yeah.
and like that's enough. That's enough out of her. Like I'm going to stand up to that inner critic that's just been taking over a lot of my thoughts since I was very
Right.
little. The inner demon that tries to put me down on a regular basis.
Maybe an inner bully, right? Yeah.
So wow, that's going to be. I look forward to reading it. When is it out?
It probably won't be till 2025 because right
Yeah.
now, we're still in the writing process, and that's the whole thing.
Good. Well, that's incredible. We're going to keep following your work, Jessica, and I look forward to reading your book and having you back on to talk about that, because I'm in it right now and I'm like going through the hard work.
Maybe I should interview you for the book then.
So, yeah. You don't want to hear what she has to say, this inner critic of mine. She's not very nice. Well, I thank you so much, Jessica Fern, for being on our show and for opening my perspective. And hopefully those that are listening learned a lot, as I have, from you. And really, it's just, I think, what it comes down to, it's talk about inner critic. Let's talk about even the outer critic in all of us. It's like the judgment of others and even the shaming of others that are different than us and living different ways. It's like, we're here to evolve and grow and be more loving. That's how I see life. And I hope that this conversation invites people to be more of that for each other.
Right. I hope it gives people permission to really be in touch more with what they want, and that it can be out here in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to close with a blessing, because I close all of my podcasts with a blessing. And it's based on really the work that I've learned from you, and the words I've learned from you. So may we maintain open minds and hearts when it comes to understanding relationship orientations. May we hold respect for each other's relationship orientations and dynamics. And may we learn to feel more secure within ourselves and create secure, loving bonds in our relationships with others. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. That was
really
beautiful.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Visit realloveready.com to continue learning with us. Please rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us get you the tools and guidance you need to form more loving relationships and create positive change in your life. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well. Many blessings and much love.